Hey there, viewers. Have you ever walked into a place and felt, deep down, that something was off, but stayed anyway? That's what one guest experienced at Diddy's party. Before things spiraled, Terrence Howard tried to warn them, but by the time they realized what was really happening, it was already too late. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Invitation Nobody Turns Down. My name's Kendra. I'm not famous or anything, not even close. I style people, hair, makeup, sometimes wardrobe if they're desperate. Been doing it freelance for almost 6 years, mostly on music video sets and commercial shoots. The kind of work that pays okay but never leads to anything real. Always someone else getting the credit, always someone prettier getting the job after. But I kept at it because, well, what else was I supposed to do? I wasn't made for retail. And I was tired of watching people on Instagram living lives I was one photo shoot away from maybe tasting. So when Miles called, I knew something had shifted. Miles isn't just anyone, he's a fixer. Not officially, but that's what everyone in the industry calls guys like him. The ones who know which party to show up to, whose ego to stroke, and what to say to get your name whispered in the right corners. I'd done a few gigs through him before. No nonsense, cash in hand, indie if needed jobs. Kendra, he said, all smooth like he always did. You still got that gold dress you wore to the event in Beverly Hills, the one with the side split? I told him, yeah, it was in the back of my closet. Good, press it. You're going to a party tonight, downtown first, suite 510 at the Palomar. Pre-party vibes. Then we head out. I didn't ask who was throwing it. I didn't need to. When Miles called with that tone, it meant someone big, someone worth breaking out the good perfume for. When I got to the hotel, I could already tell it wasn't like the other pre-parties. The hallway smelled like sandalwood and someone's expensive cologne, the kind you can't afford but you pretend you know the name of. I was let in by some girl in all black who barely looked up from her phone, and inside, yeah, it was a scene. Models, influencers, a few mid-tier actors I recognized from Netflix shows. Nobody was too loud, nobody was too drunk, everything felt careful. I grabbed a drink and scanned the room, letting the warmth from the tequila creep into my chest. That's when I saw him, Terrence Howard. Sitting by himself on one of those low couches like the kind in hookah lounges. He had a glass in one hand and was just watching. Not creepy watching, but the kind of watch people do when they're looking through things, like the room wasn't even the point. I didn't know him personally, obviously, but I'd met him once at a bet event he wouldn't remember. Still, when our eyes met, he gave me this slow, almost sad kind of nod, like he knew something I didn't. I smiled awkwardly and started to turn away. Then he stood up. You going to the house tonight? He asked. I paused. Sorry? The mansion, the real party, you on the list? I blinked, trying to play it cool. I think so. Miles didn't say much. He took a slow sip of his drink and looked me up and down, not in that gross way, more like he was measuring something invisible. You don't need to go, he said quiet. Don't go where you think you're going. I'm telling you, that man doesn't want you for your talent. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Okay, is this like a riddle? He didn't laugh back, just set his glass down, real gentle. I've been there, sat in those rooms, took the drink, watched how they look at you once you say yes. I wanted to ask more, but his eyes, man, there was so much pain in them, like he was remembering something he couldn't say out loud. And I got scared for a second, not of him, of what he wasn't saying. I mean, I started, but he just shook his head and turned away, back to the couch, back to his silence. Miles found me 20 minutes later, said the SUV was outside. As we rode through the dark, I couldn't stop thinking about what Terrence had said. I pulled out my phone, tried to text my friend Shay to tell her where I was going, but the signal was garbage or blocked. Something wasn't right. The SUV was tinted so dark I couldn't see outside. The driver didn't speak. Miles was texting someone non-stop. No music, just the low hum of the engine and the city falling behind us. Then, buzz. A text from a blocked number. "You still got time to turn around." My stomach dropped. I looked at Miles, who glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "You good?" he asked, casual. I nodded too fast. "Yeah." All good. But I wasn't. The house was in the hills, of course, somewhere above Mulholland. It looked normal at first. Big, obviously, but not tacky. No line outside, no flashing lights. You'd never guess from the street that something wild was happening inside. That was the point, I guess. Keep it quiet. Keep it contained. Security was tight. 2 guys at the front, suits with those clear earpieces. Miles whispered something and they waved us through. Inside the foyer, another girl in black took my phone and dropped it in a box with 20 others. No explanation. Just gone. A man handed me a mask. Gold Venetian style. Same for Miles. "Just wear it for the first hour," he said. "After that, you'll see." I wanted to ask what that meant, but we were already walking into the heart of the house. And what I saw, it wasn't chaos, it wasn't loud, it was rich. Everything was velvet and glass, smelled like rosewood and that faint sharpness of cocaine. People lounged on curved couches, passed trays of pills like candy, dipped strawberries in chocolate, while watching others disappear behind beaded curtains. I'd never felt more underdressed in a $900 dress. The music wasn't loud. It was low, rhythmic, pulsing, like something designed to sync with your heartbeat. I felt it in my ribs. Miles disappeared with some woman in feathers. I was alone, and yet not. There were eyes on me. I could feel them behind the masks, watching, weighing, waiting. A woman in silver heels walked past and whispered, "Don't drink the clear stuff. That's the one that makes you forget." I stared at my glass, set it down. I wandered through the halls like a tourist, each room more surreal than the last. One had a low ceiling with neon stars. Another had a swing bolted into the beams. I passed a room where people danced in slow motion, like they were underwater. Everywhere I turned, there were whispers about the Red Room. "You been in there? She came out crying last week. They say he watches everything from behind the glass." I kept moving, kept smiling, like I belonged, like I wasn't hearing the same name over and over. Diddy. They didn't say it loud, but it hung in the air. He was here, somewhere, and I was already in too deep. Chapter 2. The Mansion and the Masks. It didn't hit me all at once. The shift was gradual, like walking deeper into water until you can't feel the ground beneath your feet anymore. At first, the mansion just felt like money. Not old money, not class. It was the kind of new, loud wealth that's meant to disarm you. Every surface shined, floors polished to a mirror, walls curved in ways that made it impossible to tell where one hallway ended and the next began. Light fixtures that pulsed with soft, amber tones instead of flickering bulbs. Everything was expensive but hard to place, like it had been designed by someone with no limits, no budget, and no interest in comfort. Just control. It smelled like something floral and dark. Not perfume exactly, something richer, more ancient. I remember standing in the front gallery and trying to figure out if the scent was coming from the air system, or the people, or the polished wood, and then realizing that I hadn't seen a single exit sign since I came in. It didn't feel like a house. It felt like a trap disguised as a dream. A man with perfect posture and a tuxedo that didn't belong to any label I recognized appeared beside me and asked if I wanted a drink. I hadn't asked for one, but there it was in his hand already. I took it out of reflex and nodded, but as soon as I brought it to my lips, I hesitated. The glass was cold, too cold, and the liquid didn't smell like anything. No vodka, no tequila, not even ice. It was clear, odorless. I remembered what that woman in the hotel had said. Don't drink the clear stuff. That's the one that makes you forget. I smiled politely and let the edge of the glass touch my lips without taking a sip, just enough to look like I'd tasted it. Everyone around me wore masks now. They weren't party masks. They were curated, like art pieces. Gold filigree, black velvet, feathered edges that brushed over cheekbones like whispers. No one acknowledged them. It was as if they were extensions of the people wearing them. A tall man in a gray suit had a mask that looked like a bird's beak. A woman in emerald green had one shaped like a crescent moon. I recognized faces under some of them. Movie stars, fashion models, producers who pretended they didn't know me on set. But no one said names. No one said anything too loud. The party didn't throb with music like the ones I knew. There was music, sure, but it felt like it was inside your skull, not coming from speakers. A looping, slow rhythm, just enough to make your body sway even if you didn't want to. It had this warped vinyl quality to it, like it was melting in real time. The conversations were hushed, murmured between sips and looks and touches that lingered a second too long. I drifted, because that's what you do at parties like this. You don't stand still unless you want to be studied. Every time I caught someone's eye, they gave me a different kind of smile, some seductive, some dismissive. One woman looked at me like I was already hers. Another looked like she wanted to warn me but wasn't allowed to speak. And through it all, I kept hearing words that didn't make sense right away. "Are they stacking tonight?" someone asked near the curved staircase. "I heard there's oil in the mirrors this time," someone else replied. Another guest, eyes wide and pupils too dilated, kept repeating something about the baby oil. "Baby oil means it's happening tonight," he muttered to no one in particular before leaning against a column and giggling like he'd said something clever. I tried to follow conversations, but they always broke apart when I got too close, like watching insects scatter under light. One group stood around an oblong sculpture that looked like twisted gold vines, and I caught the tail end of a sentence. "Not technically illegal if it's consensual and documented," before the speaker made eye contact with me and fell silent. Someone else said, "Freak-offs weren't what they used to be, not since the lawsuit." They didn't explain. They didn't have to. The phrase hung in the air like incense. People disappeared through fabric curtains that fluttered even though there was no wind. Behind one of them, I heard soft moans. Behind another, nothing but silence. I passed a hallway with walls made entirely of smoked mirrors, and in the reflection I swear I saw someone following me. But when I turned, no one was there. The air got thicker the deeper I went, not just from smoke or scent, but from something else, like the oxygen was being filtered through someone's intentions. I couldn't shake the feeling that every room was being watched. Not just by security or hidden cameras, but by eyes behind the walls. There were moments where I'd pass a hallway and feel a breeze, then realize there was no open door, no vent, no reason for air to move like that, just watching. Someone grabbed my hand, a woman with a shaved head and skin that shimmered like gold dust. She looked me up and down and said, "Don't let them take you past the second floor." I blinked. "What's on the second floor?" She didn't answer, just smiled and walked off. Her mask was the only one that had teeth. I started looking for Miles. I'd lost track of him at some point, and my sense of direction was completely shot. The house didn't flow like normal architecture. There were staircases that led to nowhere, doors that circled back to rooms I'd already been in. A dining room with a glass table that looked into a koi pond below, except the fish weren't moving, and the water looked thicker than it should have. At some point I found myself on a balcony overlooking the main room. The view was dizzying. The crowd pulsed below like a single breathing thing. I watched a man in a silver suit offer something on a spoon to another guest, who leaned in and took it without asking. His eyes rolled back for a second. Then he laughed. Too loud, too sharp. I heard someone say, "That's the good ketamine," followed by a name I didn't recognize. Then they both slipped behind another curtain, this one glowing faintly red at the seams. I leaned on the railing and tried to catch my breath. That's when I saw him. Diddy. Not in the middle of the crowd, not holding court or making an entrance. He was off to the side, half hidden behind a column, talking to a man in a black turtleneck. His expression was blank, unreadable, but when the man laughed at something he said, Diddy didn't smile. He just kept looking at the floor like he was waiting for something to happen. He was wearing no mask. I stared too long. He looked up. Our eyes met. It was brief, just a second, but it felt like hours, like he saw everything I was thinking. I flinched, looked away. When I looked back, he was gone. I knew I should leave. Every part of me screamed it, but there was something about the way the house folded around you, made you feel like leaving wasn't even an option. There were no signs, no doors marked exit, no windows that didn't have blackout curtains pulled so tight you couldn't even guess where the moon was. I walked back into the main room, and the masks felt heavier now. Everyone was watching again. Everyone knew something I didn't. And somewhere, just beyond one of those silk curtains, the red room waited. Someone brushed past me and whispered, "They're stacking tonight. Better stay cute." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to find out. Chapter 3. The Red Room. I don't know why I walked toward that hallway. I didn't plan to. My body just sort of followed the warmth. That part of the mansion didn't feel like the rest of it. Everything else had that polished coldness, like you weren't supposed to touch anything. But this hallway, it pulsed. The air was thicker, damp almost, like the breath of a place that was alive. Each step felt slower than the last, like gravity was trying to warn me or drag me back. I should have stopped when the curtains parted on their own. No one pulled them aside, no one called my name. The velvet just fluttered like something had passed through and wanted me to follow. And when I stepped past them into that small antechamber lined with satin walls and soft lighting, I could feel it, that buzz in my skin, that shift in temperature. There was a door, unmarked, tall and too narrow for comfort, painted deep maroon, almost black, but when the light hit it just right, you saw the red underneath. Someone opened it for me, not with force, not even a word, just a hand on the small of my back, firm and cold, guiding me in like I was expected. The room swallowed sound the second I crossed the threshold. It didn't feel quiet. It felt muted, like everything had been dipped in syrup. The red lighting was low but heavy, casting this constant illusion that the walls were bleeding. I blinked and realized, no, they weren't red. They were mirrors. The ceiling, the floor, even the columns, everything was mirrored in a dull crimson tint, soft enough to not reflect sharply, but enough to see shapes, outlines, movement. You couldn't avoid your own image. You were inescapable here. And then I saw them. Bodies. Some standing, some kneeling, some draped over curved benches like mannequins left in the sun. No one looked surprised to see me. No one really looked at me at all. They moved like they were underwater, slow, deliberate, like every gesture had been rehearsed. Some were in lingerie, others entirely nude, others draped in silk. There was no rhythm to it, no music, just breathing and the soft sound of oil being rubbed into skin. That's what hit me next, the smell. Baby oil, thick, floral, and overwhelming. Someone near the center of the room was kneeling beside a woman on a bench, rubbing it into her back in wide, looping circles. The woman didn't react. She didn't speak. Her arms hung limp over the edge, and her face was turned to the side, staring at her own reflection in the floor. And then I heard it. A voice. Soft, raspy, repeating something under her breath. "I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not here." Over and over. Her lips barely moved. Another figure moved across the mirrored ceiling and caught my attention. Tall, lean, moving with strange precision. A man dressed in silver robes was adjusting the position of a woman's arm, not violently, just correcting it, like she was a prop, a doll. I recognized her. It took me a second, but it clicked. She'd been on that reality competition show years ago, the one that blew up and then got canceled after season 2. She was thinner now, eyes glazed, but it was her, no doubt. She didn't blink when he touched her. A security guard leaned against the far wall, half in shadow. He didn't move, just watched. Arms folded, one earpiece in, face like stone. I caught his eye. He didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge me, just kept staring into the room like he was watching a tape he'd seen 100 times. It felt wrong. Not loud wrong, not overtly abusive, but soul-deep wrong, like I'd stumbled into a ritual I wasn't supposed to witness. Every mirror was warped slightly, enough to make your body look stretched, hollow, unreal. People moved like they were trying to shed their skin. One man walked in small circles, muttering numbers. A woman near the corner was brushing someone's hair over and over, like a trance. Her hand moved mechanically, never pausing. I turned to leave. That's when I saw him. Through one of the mirrors, only it wasn't a mirror. It was a two-way panel, faint light behind the glass, a silhouette. Diddy? He was standing there, still, silent, watching. Not smiling, not frowning, just observing, like this was all part of a scene he'd memorized. His hands were at his sides, his eyes locked on something deep in the room. I couldn't tell what. He didn't react when I saw him. He didn't need to. Something about his presence made the room colder, even with the red light. It clicked then. The staging, the performers, the silence. This wasn't for pleasure. This wasn't a party. This was a show. I backed away too fast and bumped into one of the columns. My elbows scraped the mirror. No blood, but it hurt. No one turned to check. No one even blinked. The air shifted. Something sweet and chemical hit the back of my throat. I stumbled, dizzy. The smell of the oil. Maybe something else. Maybe it was in the air. I didn't know. My knees buckled for half a second, and I gripped the column until my vision settled. I forced my legs to move. Through the door, back to the hallway. The curtains were still fluttering, but this time it was too warm. My skin felt damp. My teeth buzzed. The air didn't feel like air anymore. Then, behind me, a sound. Not a moan, not laughter. A scream. Short, sharp, real. I turned, heart in my throat. The door was closed. No handle, no lock, just smooth maroon surface, like it had never opened at all. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for someone to come out, for someone to open it again. No one did, and I realized something else in that moment. There was no security outside the red room, because they didn't need any. Once you were in, they knew most people wouldn't walk out. Or if they did, they wouldn't talk. I walked back into the main room, slow, careful, like a child pretending not to know the monster is behind the curtain. I didn't know it yet, but I had just seen the part of this world that no one was supposed to describe, the part that turns rumor into memory. And it was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The Woman in White. I don't remember walking, I just remember the sound of water soft, rhythmic, like the house itself was breathing through its walls. I followed it, numb, my feet carrying me away from the red room like a dog with its tail tucked. My chest was tight. Every breath felt like it belonged to someone else. I needed air, space, Something that wasn't glass or oil or the stares of strangers with masks that smiled too much. The hallway opened into a glass-enclosed pool area, indoor, heated, pristine, like a resort ad. But it felt off, like everything else in that place. The water glowed faintly blue, casting shadows on the ceiling like dancing ghosts. You could hear the soft trickle from the jets, and something about it made the silence worse, not better. It was too still. No laughter, no splashes, no one else around, except for her. She was sitting on one of the chaise lounges by the edge of the water, curled up in a thin white slip dress that looked like it had been slept in. She had her arms wrapped around her knees, her head resting against the cushion like she'd been sitting there a long time. Not crying, not moving, just shaking, barefoot, pale, like something had drained the color from her skin. Her hair stuck to her neck like she'd been sweating or crying earlier and didn't bother to fix it. I didn't mean to approach her. I wasn't looking for anything anymore. No connection, no meaning, no closure. But something about her was magnetic, like she was the only real thing in a house full of illusions. I stepped closer and crouched down beside her. "Hey, you okay?" She looked at me slowly, like it took effort to pull her eyes into focus. For a second, I thought she wasn't going to respond, but then she said, voice flat and hoarse, "He told me I signed something. I don't remember it, but they say I did." I didn't ask who he was. I didn't have to. Her eyes drifted back to the water. Every time I try to stop coming, they remind me. They say there's paperwork, footage, money transfers. That, I agreed. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. Agreed. I sat on the edge of the lounge beside her, careful not to touch. She didn't need comfort. She needed someone to hear her. They fly us out. Different girls, different cities. Sometimes it's not even the same house, but it's always the same party, same rules, same oil. You ever smell something and know you're about to disappear into it? I didn't answer. She nodded slowly. That smell is how I know I'm not a person anymore. She didn't blink when she spoke, just stared into the rippling pool like it held answers none of us were brave enough to ask for. There was this girl I came up with, started out doing little events, modeling, promotional stuff, thought she was going to be the next big thing. Then she met him. Her lips curled around the word like it tasted bad. He said she had star potential. Took her to one of these parties, same setup, phones gone, masks on, said he'd introduce her to the right people. I waited. The silence stretched. She didn't make it past the second party. Came back shaking like she'd seen a ghost. Told me about the mirrors, about how he liked to watch, how he never touched anyone, but it was worse because he watched, like he was studying them. Her voice dropped lower, a whisper now. She tried to leave, told one of the girls she was done, that she was gonna go public. I could feel it coming before she said it. They hit her with a lawsuit, defamation, breach of contract, said they had NDAs, proof she was paid, footage of her agreeing. She couldn't fight it, didn't have the money. Last I heard, she changed her name and moved out of state. Haven't seen her since. My throat felt tight. I wanted to say something, anything, but every word sounded useless in my head. So I asked the only thing that came to mind. "Why do you keep coming back?" She didn't answer for a long time. Her shaking slowed. Then she said, "Because there's always someone worse off. And because once you're in, you never really leave. You just get quieter." She reached into the folds of the lounge cushion and pulled out a small tissue-wrapped package. Inside was a hotel key card. No logo, no name, just a room number scribbled on the back in pen. She looked at it for a long time, then tucked it back. Sometimes they don't even wait for the parties anymore. They just send a car. A key, you show up, or you get reminded. I hated how calm she was, like she'd rehearsed this, like it wasn't even shocking anymore. She leaned forward suddenly, as if waking from a trance, and her eyes locked with mine. You saw it, didn't you?" I didn't answer, but she knew. Her expression changed, softened, just for a second. "They count on people like you not speaking up. Fresh faces, new girls, you get scared, you go quiet, you think it's just you." I wanted to ask more, to sit there and pull every thread of this story until it unraveled. But before I could, a presence moved behind us, silent but heavy, a shadow falling over both of us. I turned. A man in a white suit, tall, clean-shaven, expressionless. His shoes didn't make a sound on the marble, like they weren't meant to. He wasn't security. He didn't wear a name tag. He didn't have to. Everything about him screamed importance, authority, untouchable. The woman in white went still. Not just quiet, frozen. Her entire body coiled into itself like she was bracing for something unseen. Her hands clenched the cushion. Her eyes didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. The man didn't look at me. He didn't say a word, just walked slowly past, toward a hallway lined with orchids that weren't real. When he disappeared around the corner, I turned back. She was gone. Not walked away. Gone. No sound, no footprints, no splash, just a soft indent on the cushion where she'd sat, still warm. I stood up and looked around like I'd missed something, but the room was empty, still, silent. I didn't even know her name, and somehow I already knew I'd never see her again. Chapter 5. The Price of Silence. I don't know how long I wandered after she vanished. The house had a way of folding time into itself, making you forget what hour it was, how many minutes had passed. The pool room, the mirrors, even the sound of water. All of it lingered like residue on my skin. I kept walking, numb, past velvet drapes and golden busts, through rooms that seemed both familiar and foreign. At one point I thought I heard someone call my name, but when I turned, there was no one there. Just a hallway with wallpaper that shimmered faintly like snakeskin under low lighting. Eventually I ended up back in the front atrium, or at least what looked like it. The vibe had shifted, the crowd had thinned. Those still lingering moved slower, more languid, like they were high on something that didn't come in a bottle. A woman with smeared lipstick brushed past me and whispered something in French I didn't catch. A man with a half-buttoned silk shirt stared at the ceiling, laughing to himself. The glamour had curdled, the performance was over. I was looking for miles, or maybe just a door, when someone stepped in front of me. Not big, not imposing, just precise. A man in a dark plum suit, tailored too well, the kind of fit you can't fake. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't need to. His face was blank in that dangerous way. Calculated neutrality. I could smell cologne that didn't belong to this era. Something woodsy and medicinal. It made my eyes sting. "Kendra," he said, smooth but unfeeling. "Come with me." I didn't argue. I should have, but my legs were tired, and there was a pressure in my chest that told me I didn't have many options left. He led me into a smaller room just off the main hall. It looked like an office or a lounge. Dark leather furniture, a low table, no windows. A single lamp glowed from the corner. There was a briefcase on the table, and an envelope beside it. He gestured for me to sit. I did, but on the edge, like a guest who knows she wasn't really invited. "We saw how you handled yourself tonight," he said, folding his hands in front of him. "Some people panic, some get greedy, some ask too many questions." I said nothing, just stared at the envelope. "You didn't..." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You get it." I didn't know what I was supposed to say, so I didn't say anything. He opened the envelope and slid it toward me across the table. I didn't touch it. "Consider this a thank you," he said. "You came, you played your part, and you didn't make a scene. That's rare these days." The envelope wasn't thick, but I could tell it had cash in it. Crisp, folded, maybe a few grand. Enough to make you feel noticed, not enough to walk away with power. "Keep showing up. He continued. Stay open. We'll keep in touch. Opportunities will find you. There it was, the pitch. It wasn't about a role or a collaboration. It wasn't about my work. It was about access. Doors opening. Rooms with no names. Events that don't get posted. People who don't exist on paper but move mountains behind closed doors. All I had to do was stay quiet, play along, and let them mold me into something useful. I looked down at the envelope again. It didn't feel like money. It felt like a shroud. I don't want this, I said quietly. The air cooled a few degrees. He tilted his head. I don't think you understand. I understand fine, I said, louder now. I'm just not interested. The smile vanished. He didn't argue, didn't threaten, just stared at me like I'd disappointed him. Like I'd broken character halfway through a play. Then you don't belong here, he said. Calm. Final. He stood. I didn't need to be told to leave. He didn't offer to walk me out. No one did. When I stepped back into the main hall, it was nearly empty. A different man, someone I hadn't seen before, motioned silently toward the front door. No words, no eye contact. The car that picked me up wasn't the same one I arrived in. This one was darker, windows sealed, driver silent. I sat in the back with my hands in my lap, heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to break free. The city passed by outside in shadows. I didn't recognize the route. It felt longer, unfamiliar. I didn't speak. Neither did the driver. When we finally pulled up to my building, the car didn't idle. The second I stepped out, it was gone. No goodbye, no contact, just gone. Upstairs, my apartment was dark, quiet, safe, at least on the surface. I dropped my shoes by the door and went straight for my phone, needing to tether myself to something real. I had taken pictures earlier, just a few, little moments from the hotel, a blurry shot of the hallway with the koi pond, a text from Miles with the suite number. I needed proof that any of it happened. But it was all gone. Every photo, every message, the entire conversation thread with Miles was wiped clean. Even the blocked number that sent me that text, gone. Not just deleted, erased, like it never existed. My cloud storage didn't have backups. My phone didn't even remember logging them. I stood in the middle of my living room, holding that blank screen, and felt my stomach twist in a way that no food poisoning or fever could cause, like something had crawled under my skin and rearranged my insides. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, but I didn't recognize myself. There was something behind my expression that hadn't been there before, like a film had settled over everything, a coating of something I couldn't wash off. I thought about Terrence, the way he looked at me that night, not judgmental, not even angry, just tired, worn down, like someone who had tried once to speak, to warn, and had given up after watching too many people walk right past him into the fire. He knew I would go. He knew what I would see. And he knew I wouldn't understand it until it was too late. Chapter 6. Who talks? Who disappears? Time got weird after that night. I stopped checking my calendar, stopped answering most texts. I told people I was sick, which wasn't far from the truth. Something inside me had fractured. Something I didn't have the words for yet. It wasn't fear, exactly, or shame. It was more like being unplugged from the version of the world everyone else still lived in. I went to sleep most nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if that red-lit room had been real or if it had infected my brain in some permanent way. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see faces. I saw reflections, warping in mirrors. I smelled oil. I heard whispers behind walls that didn't exist. The news didn't happen. Within 2 weeks, it started. The lawsuits, the charges, Headlines that looked like fiction. Words like racketeering, trafficking, coercion, civil conspiracy flashed across my screen. Diddy's face on every feed, frozen in that half-smile from red carpets and talk shows, now shoved under titles that felt radioactive. It didn't stop. One after another. Civil complaints filed by women with black bars over their eyes, their identities sealed. Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, former girlfriend, professional dancer, and one name I recognized immediately. Adria Sherry English. I hadn't heard it in years, but it snapped into focus like a slap. I remembered her in music videos back in the day, the way she disappeared from the scene without explanation. And now here she was, in sworn court documents, alleging that Diddy paid her in cash for years to perform sex acts at private events, that he used drugs to control and numb her, that others participated while he watched, that he liked mirrors, that baby oil was always present, that security never intervened. It wasn't déjà vu, it was confirmation. The lawsuit mentioned a span of years, 2004 to 2009, but the stories matched mine exactly. The rituals, the silence, the watching. Then came the raids. Agents swarming Diddy's properties in Miami and Los Angeles. Helicopter footage, black SUVs. Speculation about tunnels under the houses. Reporters mentioned safes being cracked open, thumb drives, surveillance equipment, a subterranean room, referred to offhand by someone on a live stream. I stayed glued to it all, not because I wanted revenge. I just needed to know I hadn't imagined it, that someone else had seen what I saw. I searched forums and TikToks, watched breakdown videos where people speculated about the meaning of the masks, the rooms, the coded language in texts. People were pulling footage from old interviews, lining up timelines, trying to piece together a picture none of them had actually been inside. They were guessing, they were close, but they didn't know the heat of that air, or how still a room can be when everyone inside has already given up. Then, in the middle of the night, I came across a podcast clip. It had less than 1,000 views, buried under a sea of reaction videos and commentary, but the voice was unmistakable. Terrence Howard. He was speaking calmly, matter of fact. There was no dramatic music, no clickbait title, just him sitting in a small studio, talking to a host who barely got a word in. I went over to his house a few times, Terrence said, his voice level. He invited me to help with acting, said he wanted to work on some roles, but it wasn't that. He'd sit there and just look at me. Never said much, just stared, like I was a piece of something he already owned. He sipped from his drink, quiet for a beat. I don't bend over like that, he added, not with bitterness, with finality, a statement, a line in the sand. The host didn't ask him to clarify. He didn't need to. I sat there staring at my screen long after the clip ended. I replayed it, just to hear the silence between his sentences. That stillness, that weight. It wasn't about sex. It had never been. It was about possession, power. The way you study an animal before putting it in a cage. Everything clicked. Why the rooms were designed like stages, why Diddy didn't participate, why he watched, why the woman in white spoke like she didn't belong to herself anymore. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about breaking people down so they didn't even realize they'd been broken. That's why the silence felt so absolute. But not everyone stayed silent. A few more women came forward, publicly this time, faces blurred, voices altered. One said she signed something she didn't understand. Another claimed she was threatened after trying to leave. The internet lit up with people choosing sides, defenders, deniers, opportunists. But I only listened to the quiet ones, the ones who spoke without names, the ones who didn't try to go viral. Then it stopped. Or rather, they stopped. The statements slowed. Accounts were deleted. One woman's post thread, which had gone semi-viral the night before, was gone by morning. People said she had settled, A few thought she was paid off. Others said she was pressured by lawyers. No one knew for sure. And the woman in white? Nothing. I searched everywhere. Forums, hashtags, even reverse image searches using a blurry photo I thought might have been her from another party someone posted. Nothing came up. No name, no mention, like she'd evaporated. It felt wrong to say she was missing. That implied someone was looking for her, but I knew no one was. She was just erased. And I was supposed to be next. That realization crept in one night while I was brushing my teeth, staring at my reflection through fogged glass. The silence around me wasn't safety, it was design. I hadn't been spared because I was brave or lucky. I'd been forgotten because I didn't matter yet. I hadn't talked, and maybe that's what they counted on, that most people once brushed up against that kind of power shrink, disappear, convince themselves it was all a misunderstanding, a weird night, a blurry memory not worth the risk of explaining. You tell yourself no one would believe you anyway, that you'd sound bitter, that it's better to move on. But the more I watched the names come up in court filings, the more I saw people disappear, I realized I wasn't haunted by what I saw in the Red Room. I was haunted by how normal it all felt in the moment. How easy it was to stand still while someone else whispered, "I'm not here," into a mirror. Chapter 7. The House That Burned Itself. By spring, the fall had turned into a collapse. It was slow at first, like a hairline crack in glass that pretends to hold together until one touch makes it all shatter. The headlines came daily now. Another company backing out, another frozen account, another piece of the empire vanishing like mist. Brands that once begged for a seat at his table were scrubbing their socials clean, deleting old campaigns, pretending they never shared the same air. It wasn't just the music anymore. It was clothing lines, liquor deals, real estate, endorsements. He was vanishing in real time. I watched it all from my couch, feet tucked under a blanket I hadn't washed in weeks, the television humming like it was feeding me something important. The anchors didn't sound surprised, just fascinated, like they were reporting on a storm they knew was coming, but had no idea would hit this hard. Then the podcasts start. First, it was industry gossip shows, the kind where nothing is verified but everything feels true. Then came the long-form exposés, the ones with piano music under monologues and grainy black and white photos on screen. But one clip cut through all the noise. It wasn't slick, it wasn't polished, it sounded like it was recorded in a garage. The host's voice was jittery with caffeine, but the guest's voice was calm, too calm. "I worked security at 3 of his properties," the man said. They kept his name out. His voice was pitched down, but there was a steadiness to it that didn't need embellishment. "They don't let you carry your own phone, not even on your break. You sign a paper that says you saw nothing, heard nothing. You don't even call him by name, just him." The host asked what he meant by tunnels. The man took a breath. "The stuff in those tunnels?" That was just the tip. He didn't elaborate much, just said there were whole rooms not on any blueprint. Doors that locked from the outside, coded phrases like "clean and sealed" and "stack complete." He said there were lists, guest logs, but not with real names, aliases, numbers, sometimes just symbols. They called them tally sheets. I paused the clip, rewound it, played that phrase again. Tally sheets. I remembered the woman in white, how she'd said there were girls rotated between cities, that sometimes it wasn't even a party, just a key card, a room, an expectation. And now here it was, in the court filings, transcripts unsealed in one of the civil cases, page after page of redacted names, with lawyers arguing over what voluntary meant in environments where phones were confiscated and substances were administered without documentation. One plaintiff said she didn't remember saying yes, only waking up the next day in a hotel with $1,500 in cash on the nightstand. Another said she saw a man with a clipboard checking off names as women were led into a mirrored room. They never called it trafficking outright, not in the transcripts, but the shape of it was there, hiding under legalese and settlement agreements. I started getting messages, first from someone I'd worked with on a video shoot, asking if I'd heard anything. Then a girl I barely remembered from a runway gig said she had been approached by a documentary crew, something big, maybe even Netflix level. They were interviewing people who'd been around back in the day, people who could confirm the culture. She said she'd given them my name. They reached out within a week. The producer was polite, too polite, said they respected my privacy, that I could stay anonymous if I wanted, they just wanted my insight. Said others were finally coming forward, said this could be the moment to help tell the truth. I listened, I nodded, I said I'd think about it. Then I blocked the number, because they didn't get it. None of them did. You weren't in the room. You didn't see the mirror crack. You didn't feel that air shift, thick with oil and silence, while a man stood behind a wall of glass, like God deciding whether to blink. You didn't watch a woman whisper herself out of existence. You didn't meet a version of yourself you hoped would never surface again. I wasn't scared of speaking. I was scared of what speaking would turn me into. The nightmares didn't stop. If anything, they got louder. I'd wake up sweating, my hands clenched, the smell of rosewood and baby oil thick in my nose, like I'd been dunked in it. I'd see flashes, not full memories, just broken frames. A red-lit face, a mouth moving behind a mask. My own reflection, warped and flickering, split down the middle. And always his eyes, watching, not angry, not lustful, just patient. Like he knew the house would burn, but that it didn't matter, because the fire was inside the people who left it. Some nights I sat by my bedroom window, just breathing, trying to remind myself I was still here, still real, not a number on a tally sheet, not a name in an NDA. I'd scroll through my phone and stare at the empty message threads, the missing photos, and wonder if I'd ever actually been there at all. But then I'd remember Terrence. That quiet look on his face when he warned me. It wasn't rage, it wasn't judgment. It was grief, because he'd seen it already. The whole pattern, the way it starts, the way it ends, and the way most people pretend they didn't know what it was until it's too late. He wasn't angry. I didn't listen. He was sad because he knew I wouldn't. Chapter 8, the final text. Months passed. Not in a dramatic, sweeping way, just slow and subtle, like water eroding stone. The headlines became less urgent. The public's fascination, which had once surged like a tidal wave, eventually pulled back, leaving behind debris and scattered names half-remembered. People moved on, as they always do. Some turned their attention to the next scandal. Others insisted it had all been exaggerated, misunderstood, blown out of proportion. But I didn't move on. Not really. I changed, sure, stopped taking last-minute gigs, stopped going to events where the invite came from someone I didn't fully trust. I started saying no more often. I ghosted 3 people I used to call close, just because they reminded me of a time when I still believed things were simpler. I went back to my roots. Small shoots, corporate work, unglamorous but clean, places with contracts I could read, coffee machines that didn't smell like perfume and regret. I didn't go to parties. I didn't pick up unknown numbers, and I stopped wearing anything that shimmered. Therapy didn't help, not because it was bad, but because there was no name for what I'd seen, no diagnosis for the way a house could follow you, could live in your bloodstream like a parasite. I didn't tell the full story, just said I'd witnessed something exploitative, something I couldn't unsee. The therapist nodded a lot, wrote things down, suggested breathing exercises. I never went back after the 3rd session. My dreams got quieter, but they never stopped. The same imagery would loop like film left to burn through a projector. Red walls, oil-slicked skin, my own reflection twisting until I couldn't tell where my body ended and the room began. Sometimes I'd wake up with a sore throat from screaming into my pillow without knowing it. Other nights, I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for morning. Diddy was behind bars now, awaiting trial. The charges had stacked, one after another, until even the most loyal defenders couldn't ignore them. The coverage called it a reckoning, a fall from grace, a long time coming, but none of that meant anything to me, not anymore. It was just background noise to the silence I carried. I didn't care about justice, I cared about forgetting, but forgetting never came. And then one night, I got the text. It was around 1:14 a.m. I just turned off the TV and was walking toward my bedroom, phone in hand, scrolling out of habit. No notifications, nothing new. Then, in the middle of the screen, a message from a number not saved in my contacts. Burner, no name, no ID. He saw you, you were in the room. That was it. Just those words. My blood went cold. My breath caught in my throat, like I'd swallowed something sharp and invisible. I stared at the screen, thumb frozen above it. 1,000 thoughts flashed at once. Was this a sick joke? A scam? Someone from the party? Someone watching me now? Then the second message came. A photo. Low resolution, grainy, like it had been compressed and resent too many times, but the color was unmistakable. Red. The lighting, the angles. It was the red room, the mirrors, the figures, the distortion. And in the center of the photo, partially reflected in one of the warped glass panels, was me. Standing near the mirror, frozen. Expression unclear, but posture unmistakable. I didn't remember anyone taking that picture. I didn't even know there had been cameras. But there it was. Proof of what I still don't know. Proof that I'd been there, that someone else had watched me, that I'd survived something designed to erase people. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a soft thud and slid under the couch, screen still glowing. As I didn't pick it up. I didn't move for a long time. The apartment felt suddenly too small, the walls too thin. I heard nothing, but I felt something. Like a presence curling back around me, watching again, not with eyes, but with memory. Because that's the real curse of places like that. They don't just hurt you in the moment, they stay. In the corners of your vision, in the pauses between breaths, in the questions you never ask again. They stay in the silence. And some doors once opened never really close.